Welcome to the Investing Mastermind Podcast. I'm Michelle Markey.
And I'm Signe Lundholt.
And today we're bringing you our podcast recording live from Omaha, Nebraska, where Signe and I just attended the Berkshire Hathaway Annual Meeting, also known as the Shareholders Festival in beautiful Omaha this May 2023. And we are so grateful for our listeners' questions, and we're going to answer some of your questions and also recap what our experience was like, because we learned so much and we met amazing, wonderful people. And Signe, what do you want to kick us off with?
Yeah, so we're so happy to be here, and thank you so much for the questions. We asked on Instagram if the listeners had any questions. So Craig asks, I watched a lot of the QA online. Great stuff. So, what kind of C's candy did you try?
Well, I had some of the peanut brittle. How about you?
I like the Scotch Mellow, which is a marshmallow with caramel and dark chocolate. So I bought some of those also because C's Candy, which is a chocolate manufacturer, we can't get that in Europe. And I also know it's difficult to get in parts of the United States. So I bought a stash that I'm going to bring home to Denmark of different kinds of chocolate. So great question, Craig. Another question is, how come are we here in Omaha? Like, Craig watched the QA online and you guys can watch it too. It's on YouTube now, the QA with Warren Buffett. So how come we're here in person and not just watching it online? Michelle, why are you here?
Well, I'm here because there's just so much to get out of being in person in Omaha. Like, we make friends with like-minded investors, and sometimes we meet them first online in social media. And then when we get to say, let's meet up at Omaha, it's like a family gathering. It's like seeing some of your best friends or people who are going to become your best friends. And then you make these lifelong friendships and help each other grow as investors. So it's just an incredible, generous, pay it forward kind of environment and atmosphere where everybody wants to help each other. Everybody is just so caring and nice, and not to mention all the free food, because I love food. At many of the events are very much free, so you could kind of go the whole week without having to spend your own money, and you can get a lot of free lunches. And it's kind of ironic because some people say there's no such thing as a free lunch, but there definitely is if you attend the Berkshire meeting. And what about you, Signe?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that. You say there's no such thing as a free lunch, but in Omaha there is. And not only is the lunch free, but while you have your lunch, there's some event going on where you actually get to learn something from expert investors. So it's not only free lunch, it's free knowledge included. So definitely also one of the reasons why you should come to Omaha. For me, I came first time last year. And the reason I came last year was because it was on my bucket list. I just had to go to an annual meeting. And then it turns out that it's just such an amazing event. Not only it's an interesting QA session, I can watch that online. But like Michelle says, it's really about meeting the people here. It's amazing people, and you're building new friendships, you're building knowledge, you're meeting people that can help you on your investing journey. And most of the people that come here are all in a mindset of paying it forward.
And we pardon the slight interruptions with some potential emergency vehicles passing by. As you can probably imagine, we're not in our usual recording spot, so please forgive any street noise you may pick up on the recording.
Yeah, it's a part of, being able to record here live right after the meeting and giving you guys our first impressions. One thing, Michelle, that I would actually like to know from you was, in terms of the Q&A from Warren Buffett that people can watch online, what was something that you got out of everything that Buffett said in those, was it 7 or 8 hours?
Oh, yeah. And it's just amazing how they can sit up there at 92 going on 93, and that's Buffett, and Munger is 99 going on 100. So I'm looking forward to him being around next year at the big 100. But one of the main takeaways I took from Buffett was he said back in 2007, 2008, people were saying that cash is trash. And he was disagreeing with that. He was saying the U.S. Federal Reserve has a lot on their balance sheet, but he seems to be okay with that. Like Buffett is not worried at all about the amount of liabilities and debt that the US government is kind of in. And in spite of that, he seems to think that cash is useful. So it's no wonder that Berkshire is sitting on about $130 billion of cash that are mostly in US Treasury. So he's got a stake in a lot of the outstanding US debt and bonds that the government just has going on. So it's surprising that Buffett wouldn't think that it's too much of a concern. Like there's so many people in the media freaking out about, oh my God, the US balance sheet is so high, it's the highest it's ever been. But yet he's making it seem like, the world will continue, the USA will keep producing a lot of great products and services and not to worry. And I thought that was an encouraging sign of confidence in the US economy, because so many people, can focus on the negative. But when you focus on the positive of the strengths of this country and what we're able to produce, I think there's a lot that we can be proud of in America. And when someone like Buffett is saying that, yeah, inflation is still up there, but at least we're getting, around 5% on some of our savings or treasury bonds, that's not half bad. So even though I know he talked about Paul Volcker a little bit, the Federal Reserve chairman in the 80s, who said, we needed to really clamp down on inflation by raising interest rates. I think that Buffett approves of what the Fed is currently doing. So with that vote of confidence, it kind of seems like it's sort of business as usual at Berkshire and not to fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really think what you're saying here is super interesting, Michelle. It's something that I could just spend hours also discussing. And, even with this QA session, he said so many interesting and good things to bounce off of what you just said. For me, one thing I took out of all of those hours of, listening to Buffett and Munger was that the short-term gains that is so popular these days. Also, we see it with AI. Of course, there was questions about artificial intelligence and that kind of technology. And Buffett actually tried some of the AI technologies out there that Bill Gates showed him. But to get back to my point, some of all that short-term gain that we see today and that people are chasing, it's so popular. And if you're a long-term thinker, you have a competitive advantage against everybody else because you're thinking about the long term instead of thinking about short-term gains. And we've discussed it in a previous podcast about delayed gratification and things like that. And I know Tony Robbins, which is someone I find very inspiring, also, says that you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish in a decade. And he has found that throughout his life. And we could see it on Buffett, how he just keeps compounding. So there is something to some of those people that are older now and have that experience that we need to listen to them. So I found that was a good point.
Right.
Another question that would be interesting to talk about is, okay, so what else went on? What else did we learn from this event? Because one thing is that there's the QA on Saturday, which is the main event, but there are so many things happening outside of that main event. And what was some takeaways we had from some of the other events that went on in Omaha this weekend?
Yeah, for sure. One of the main events that stands out to me where Signe and I had a blast was Matthew Peterson's barbecue.
Oh, yeah.
And
great
it
time.
was great people, great food. Matthew Peterson and his family are so kind and so full of positive energy and good vibes. And I think that kind of atmosphere is just amazing. And, I came to learn more about Matthew Peterson's investment style. And I feel like I relate well to how he invests. So it makes me want to learn even more and try to, be closer to him. And hopefully we'll get him on our podcast at some point and get to learn even more from him. And, in addition to his barbecue that he hosted, other events that were standing out to me included Guy Spears' Value X, where for 4 hours, it was like a TED Talk where we had some fantastic guests that Guy and his team, including Chantal and David, they coordinated to have these amazing investors and also people who are students of life host these talks of teaching us some wisdom that they've taken away in their life experience. And it ranged from a photographer who took Warren Buffett's picture 30 years ago to someone who founded a very successful blog enterprise. So, some of those people, I'm sure you can figure out who they are, but it was just so cool to learn from people there and be able to ask questions. Like I got to ask Monish Pabrai a question, and I'll tell you guys in a future episode what I asked Monish Pabrai and what he answered. But Signe, what did you find that stood out to you about some of these additional events?
Just like you, I really enjoyed Matthew's barbecue. Again, we're talking about people that are paying it forward, and Matthew definitely is such a fantastic person. And the people there at his event were all magnificent. I'm so much looking forward to keeping in touch with some of the people I met at that barbecue. Value X, we can't share much of the names there. What Guy Spears shared in his newsletter was that Monish was going to be there, Brian Lawrence, Adam Mead. So that was just some of the people that came to Value X that I think we're allowed to mention since it was in the newsletter. But besides that, everything that went on at that event were staying within that audience. And it was really, really amazing. I'm incredibly grateful that I got to experience that event and learn from some of these incredible minds. Another event that I really enjoyed, much more casual, that I'm really happy that we got to attend, was the Investors Podcast event. It was more of a social mixer, and I really enjoyed meeting the Investors Podcast team and just reconnecting with some of the people that was there at the party, to drop some names. For example, Stig Brodersen, the co-founder of the Investors Podcast. Tobias Carlisle was there. Sean from the team. Matthew Peterson came by.
And there was also Clay and Trey. I mixed up their names. I called one the other, and they were very kind because I was like, oh yeah, you guys are both with TIP, but I don't know, I guess their names rhyme, so they had a little fun with that. But they were just so gracious and kind, and I wish we had met Rebecca. We didn't get to meet her, but we were on her podcast, Millennial Investing, and she was just so great, super well organized. I'm so impressed with her, and I hope to meet her someday. But the whole TIP team is world class. They are really great at what they do, and we're just so grateful that Stig was willing to share some of his time with us and host these events. Thank you so much, Clay, for all your hard work. And I think a lot of people really enjoyed them because the TIP events were one of the most sought out. I think they had events almost every day. So you guys did an amazing job hosting and being so generous to so many people.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Oh, and by the way, speaking of free food and drinks, the only place where you don't really get any free food and drinks that much is on the day of the Berkshire Hathaway meeting itself on the Saturday. Although if you get there early enough in the morning, you will be able to get some free coffee, granola bars, some very sweet American treats that are
donuts,
maybe a little bit too much sugar for my likes, but you might be able to get some soda, coffee, water, but a lot of those things run out fast. So although you're on your own for lunch, during the Saturday, a lot of people had bought lunch vouchers for Jason's Deli. So I saw that for folks who want that. And there's also concession stand food like hot dogs, popcorn, things of that kind. So the only place you can really expect to pay is on Berkshire Hathaway Day itself, the irony. And it's kind of funny, but I know that since Buffett is such a capitalist, he can't not charge people for a good time. I mean, he's pretty generous, though, in giving a lot of shareholder discounts, and that's what you can actually expect at the exhibit hall. They call it the Berkshire Bazaar of Bargains, and what you can expect there is to get some great discounts at all of the shops if you stop by them, like Justin's Boots, which are these cowboy boots, and I was trying some, and I was really interested in perhaps buying some cowboy boots just because they're so cool. But I resisted the urge, and there's stands from Brooks, the running shoe company, and like Geico had some stands there. You could pose with the gecko. And
did you buy anything?
Oh, I just bought some notebooks, and I bought little things like notebooks and koozies with Buffett and Munger's face. I bought little things this year. Last year I bought more books, but these things will quickly fill up in your luggage if you buy them. But
I know. I bought these Squishmallows.
Oh, yeah.
And my kids love those. There was one with Charlie and one with Warren. And I simply had to get some of those for my kids. I hope they're going to love them just as much as I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bought notebooks as well and pens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, these are just little useful mementos from our time here. And it's something to give back to them. But, since Signe and I are Buffett style investors, we don't go too crazy with the shopping because we know what's a good deal, and we know, how to keep our spending in check, because that's how you become wealthy, by spending below your means. As Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime partner and best friend, has said, you will be rich as long as you spend below what you earn. So
yeah, they actually talked about that in the meeting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that I thought was super funny, because Buffett, he's got a lot of humor. Mm-hmm. And what he said was that they were actually competing against another event that went on Saturday. And that was the coronation of a king in England.
Oh, was
remember?
it?
Yeah.
Oh, man. That's why they were saying King Charles. But
yeah, exactly. Because the joke was that, in Berkshire, there's another king, Charlie.
That's right.
So I thought that was kind of a funny joke that, we were, they're competing against the coronation of King Charles in the UK, and we had our own King Charlie right there at Berkshire. So
that's hilarious. And I mean, I didn't even know about the coronation happening on the same day, because I'm just so zeroed in, focused on Berkshire and investing. And so even though it's a little guilty pleasure to learn about the royals, like I watched The Crown and everything, but that was like not even on my radar. I only cared about the Charlie in front of us and his best friend. So, it's kind of amazing how, we can, everything else in the world kind of takes a back seat when you're there. It's almost like going to Disney World. Like you're just so wrapped immersed in the energy, and you're just there's so much to do and so little time. Like I felt like this year, everything went by so much faster. Like last year, I felt like I had more time, but it was my first time last year, so I felt like I didn't know enough yet. Like I didn't get to go to certain events last year that I got to go to this year. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big difference. Like this year, I was a little bit wiser, and I was like, all right, I'm definitely going to some of these events that I missed last year, and that's been really great. Like to be able to have that opportunity again.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I also attended much more event, but for me, it was really, I felt I had so much more energy this year. I think last year I was so excited to be there, and that just took so much energy from me. And this year I had more, energy, space to actually focus on being at the event and participating in everything and focusing on I was there. So yeah, that was definitely one thing I took away. A last thing that we could talk about is something very special that happens right before the QA that only shareholders get to watch in the auditorium. It's a very, very special thing that Warren Buffett does every year for shareholders that we get to see on the screens, and we're not allowed to record it. We're not allowed to, they don't broadcast it anywhere. It's a very, very special Berkshire movie.
Oh yeah.
How did you like the movie this year?
I mean, I thought it was hilarious because I think we can say as much of what we saw.
Of course.
Usually these company movies feature Buffett giving a little monologue in the beginning, and then there's a ton of advertisements from the companies that Berkshire owns, like Geico, and they have some of their jewelry shops, and they also featured a recording from years ago when Jamie Lee Curtis was not yet an Oscar winner. So this was like multiple years ago where Jamie Lee Curtis had a little skit with Charlie and Warren, and she's acting like this sort of attractive female, and Buffett is trying to convince Charlie to invest in internet stocks, and Charlie is saying no to Warren. So Warren goes to Jamie Lee Curtis because he knows that Charlie has a soft spot for her, and he tries to get her to convince Charlie to let Buffett buy internet stocks. So clearly this skit was probably from the late 90s or so. And, Jamie Lee calls up Charlie and is like, hey, Charlie, like all, flirting with him. And you see Charlie just, blissfully talking to Jamie Lee and ignoring his phone call with his wife that he was on. And he just hung up the phone on his wife in order to talk to Jamie Lee Curtis. So it's just hilarious. And then they make pretend as if Munger permits Buffett to buy internet stocks because of that little intervention. But then they fast forward eventually after some more commercials, and then it's now Buffett ringing the doorbell of Jamie Lee Curtis, and this was clearly filmed very recently
current time.
Yeah, because now in the modern day, she said during that skit that, she's an Academy Award winner, and she did that from her role in Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
And
I watched it on the airplane here, actually.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. Like, we learned from another person last year who attended the Berkshire meeting that he felt it was one of the best movies he's ever seen, and he's a cinemaphile. So I was like, well, I better watch this movie because it's got to be really great. And it is very great.
It was a great company leader, so it was something that was worth listening to.
Exactly.
And he loved movies, so he was right.
And he was right. That movie won a ton of Academy Awards, like 7 if I'm not mistaken. So considering, they were able to feature in their skit this year an Academy Award winner. I mean, and the cool thing about how they, got her to participate last time, and they didn't pay her any money for this. She just did this out of the goodness of her heart to have fun. And we as shareholders got to watch and experience that movie. So it was super fun. And I only liked last year's movie a little bit more because it featured Bill Murray and kind of reenacting the Groundhog Day.
It was funny.
Where Buffett, because we had the pandemic, unfortunately, in the past couple of years before, in 2020 and 2021, the actual in-person meeting at Berkshire got canceled. So the skit featured Buffett kind of coming up to the arena and trying to get in because he's like, we got to go to the shareholders meeting.
And the parking lot is just totally empty, right?
Right.
Because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and then Bill Murray is like a bouncer, and he's like, are you on the list? And Buffett's like, no. But then he keeps repeating that trying to getting into the stadium situation. And then one time he's like, Bill Murray asked, are you Jimmy Buffett, the singer? And he's like, yep, that's me. And he's like dressed in a Hawaiian shirt with a little banjo or something. And he's like, yep, I'm Jimmy. And then he walks right in. But then later the security guards find Buffett and are like, you're not Jimmy Buffett. So it's just hilarious how, entertaining they are.
Yeah, and this year they actually spun off that one too, right? Where, Jamie Lee Curtis is telling Buffett if he's Jimmy Buffett and Margaritaville or something like that.
Margaritaville, yeah. It was, like a take on Margaritaville. But, Jamie Lee kept saying, I think what a great company name is just call it Munger, like rename the company. Berkshire Hathaway was a terrible name, and rename it to Munger because she was trying to, boost Munger's ego.
Yeah.
So it's just hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. It was super funny. So last year and this year as well, in that video, they showed some footage from the Solomon court case. Mm-hmm. And the quote from there is, lose money for the firm and I'll be understanding. Lose a shred of reputation for the firm and I'll be ruthless. I think he plays that video at every shareholder meeting, and it is, it really shows his character as well. And playing that is food for thought, for sure.
Yeah, and it just speaks to, how Buffett has said that he wants management with integrity, talent, energy, intelligence. And if you don't have those things, you are at risk of of doing some real damage in a company. And, Buffett wants there to be a positive culture. You want to live up to these morals that, people from Buffett's generation, these are before the baby boomers. So they may have been called, I think Charlie might have been part of the greatest generation, and Buffett's generation might be the silent generation. I'm not entirely clear on some of that, but
he's from 24.
I think Munger's from 1924, and that's when the generation that experienced World War I sometimes, of like their parents experienced that and the fallout from there. But then Buffett was born in 1930, so they may be in slightly different generations, but they're such great friends. And so, we have a lot to learn from, and they really believed in civic duty and, honor to your country. And another big thing that stood out to me was just how much Buffett was rueful about the tribalism happening in this country. And, it's becoming more partisan. And I think that he feels like that's a regrettable outcome of recent events. And he's still optimistic. He still believes that the babies born in America today have the best possible life. So in spite of increased tensions, it's still, you cannot do wrong by being in this country. If you're here, you have tons of opportunity. You are so lucky if you are either born here or have the opportunity to work here and live here. You have it the best possible that you could ever have it. So instead of focusing on our differences, I think the main moral of the story is focus on what we have in common and what can bring us together.
Yeah, and Berkshire Hathaway and investing is definitely one of those things that brings us together, right? Because at this meeting, everyone is coming together, no matter what political party you vote or anything. There's nothing like that. We all come together, pay it forward, and everybody, wants the best out of the event and talking investing. So definitely a thing that unites us. With that, it's time to say goodbye for now. We've been going for a long time and we could keep on going about the event. We will be back on Tuesday and talk a little bit more about what we got out of the QA and the Berkshire Hathaway Annual Meeting.
For sure. I can't wait to keep talking about it. Till next time.
Bye-bye. If you enjoyed the show and found the content informational, we would be super grateful if you would leave us a review and follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you automatically get new episodes in your feed. We publish a new show every Tuesday.
The contents of the Investing Mastermind podcast are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. None of this is investing advice, and if you need help in your personal situation, please consult with a professional.